the difference between thinking and doing and living in the 21st century. They teach us about being a real quarterback-oriented games. We don't have to just use video games and live in the shadows of good things because of them. We grow up with agility far larger and bigger than we are tall. Parents are the champions and have to be our first life coaches and know-it-alls. Who knows how this came to be? Coaches will ask you if you know your right foot from your left, if you know yourself, if you act knowingly good or bad, if you can move and negotiate a field with style and form, if you can tackle or throw a pass, or if your last name is that of a clown. If you can let someone know on the team that you are in trouble before you cause yourself or someone else trouble. If you are ready to learn teamwork or aware that you started out today with your pants down or your sportsmanship was left on the kitchen table, if you know the social studies, the alphabets, science, music, characters, and the stats and the numbers of a great student player eligible to stay on the team, and if you know the poise of great athletic champions and their scientific attitudes that are historical or music to us now, if you have the swag of the game, the discipline, the performance, and artistic form down pat, and if you have the style of gymnastics that the sport has with life, if you have the work ethic and determination to make it all seem easy and not a game at all, if you have the knowledge of all the above, or you don't know things like this even make the difference. I think that when it comes to the importance of parents and their field and self-knowledge, wisdom, virtues, and courage, their teachings, love, respect, care that they illustrate on the field and in the grind of life with their actions and their ideas, experiences, muscle, and strategic magic and skills wrapped around us with their priceless love. For their verbs to be that make us winners in this hard and fast third century that without them, kids and adults, athletes could hardly see or do anything at all. Parents teach us the difference between playing video games and playing on the field. Parents teach us how to be champions. A huge hug should go to parents, coaches, and parent-like community people who have love on the field for you and who are champions for your life, both in and out the games.
Started with a little different twist on this particular edition of the online dinner party and all along those lines. So that was a poet that had sent that particular poem about the importance of parents and parents as coaches and all along those lines. So that's the one that we've run a couple of times here on this network and on this show, but it is always one that catches people's attention. So I thought I'd open up this particular edition of the online dinner party with that particular excerpt and all along those lines. But definitely it's been a busy week here in Durham, North Carolina. We just had some rain. It was some heavy rain down there for a minute, and now it's a little bit on the warm side and everything like that. So it brought in some warm temperatures. Now, whether those warm temperatures stay or not, who knows? You never can tell with the weather here in the Carolinas or just in America in general, oftentimes and all along those lines. But it's been a very full week. As many of you know, I work at the Hayti Heritage Center, which is a cultural arts center, celebrating its 50th year this year in 2025. So it was started in 1975, but they had a very busy week this past weekend. There was a play about a gentleman who was slain after coming from the World Wars. I believe it was the second one, World War II, and he was having a incident with the bus and all along those lines, and he was slain in a racist attack, Booker Spicely, and they've done a play, basically a one man along with a accompaniment, musical accompaniment play. Mike Wiley does an amazing job with these plays, as does Howard Kraft, and they're the ones that composed this particular one, and it was definitely well received on Friday evening and all along those lines. So that was taking place on Friday. And then on Saturday, there is a weekend youth camp that goes on regularly. And they were doing everything from dance to music to learning about, I believe it was agriculture this time around, that Mr. Imes was teaching them, as well as a number of other things. Because I know in the past, he's also taught them about some other things, even with technology and things along those lines. But definitely, there's always a great deal that is going on with that youth camp that is every Saturday. And then Satos was having their dance class as well. So they do those on Saturday also. And then that took place. And then that evening, there was a young lady from Boston. I believe her dad is either a retired professor or about to be a retired professor over at Duke University. But they had been to some events at the Hayti Heritage Center, knew what kind of acoustics we had, and thought that it would be a great venue for her opera performance. So she did an opera performance that featured some of the music of Mozart, Puccini, I should say, as well as some of the other greats. I know there was even a piece, I think, that had a Cinderella type number and a number of other things, and that was with her piano accompanying this as well. The one-man show had a guitar accompanying this. So definitely both performances had somebody that was providing some musical component to it as well. So that was definitely quite interesting, and it was a good performance. I think that the young lady, Lily, is based in Lily Smith, if I'm remembering her name right correctly. I think it's Lily Kiki Smith, but she is based in Boston, as is her pianist, and they came down for this performance and all along those lines. And it was we see about 400, and it was probably about maybe a quarter full or something like that. So a decent crowd, not a packed house, but still some great opera music and all along those lines. And then on Sunday, there was the church that meets there, because the Hayti Heritage Center is a converted church and all along those lines. So there was a small church that meets in one of our classrooms. And then later on, there was a gentleman celebrating his 80th birthday. So he was having his 80th birthday party at that particular venue. And then on Monday, it was African dance for women. I don't think that there was anything major going on that afternoon that I can recall or anything like that. And then on Tuesday, which was yesterday, there was a movie being shown that was dealing with the way that the Duke University Hospital was segregated in the age of segregation. So there was a black ward and a white ward, and some of the folks in the black ward were also sent to Lincoln Hospital, because there was definitely a segregated hospital here as well. So the two gentlemen that both have affiliations with Duke University and the Duke Hospital were talking about that particular production. Ran into a friend of mine, Dilcy Davis, who's working on a film about the Allen Building takeover, which happened during, I want to say, the late 60s or early 70s, when a time that many universities, including Duke, were trying to get situated and trying to find a way to recognize and even get some Black studies and also get more Black students and all along those lines. So I think that that's one of the things that they were asking for in that particular protest, was to get some more Black studies and also get some more faculty that were African-American oriented. And there might have been some other demands as well. But my good friend Dilcy Davis, who is a filmmaker, was working on that project. As a matter of fact, she's got to go up to Milwaukee to talk to one of my mentors who was involved in that struggle, that being Howard Fuller, and all along those lines. But I've got two guests that are on with me today at the dinner party, so I'm going to bring them on. And one of them is a actor that I know is down there at an event that I was at. And then we've got Sean Parker, and we might have some other people joining us as well. But Andre Fife, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the name correctly, and all along those lines. But he's going to come and join us in conversation, talk about some of the things he's doing there in London in the acting world and what he thought of that particular conference, because that was my first time ever going to that conference, even though I'd had some of my cohorts, including some of the cohorts from this network that had been to that conference in the past, but I had not been to it in the past. So I was very much interested in it. Glad to be, because I used to go regularly to the ABFF, which is the American Black Film Festival, which is also in Miami, but that's held more in South Beach, whereas this was more in the downtown region and all along those lines. But it was great to see this particular festival and all along those lines, or conference, I should say. Definitely learned a lot about Amazon Roku. There were a number of great speakers. And like I was telling you before, it's always good when you can get down to the South Beach and enjoy some of that weather. Because I know when you said you came back to London, you were back in the rainy weather, which London is known for. And I'd also told you that, you know, even though I might be in my 60s and everything, it's still good to see some eye candy. And there was definitely some eye candy around the Miami area and all along that area. So definitely, how did you find out about that particular conference? And just share with our audience a little bit about your acting career, because I know you've done a number of things that are based there in London, including some various projects and all along those lines. So share with our listeners a little bit about what you've got going on, because I know that you've got some work that you've done with the BBC and all along those lines. And many people know BBC because even some of the BBC shows wind up making it to the American market, because I want to say Who Wants to Be a Millionaire actually started there in London, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines. But I also know that you've been part of the Outlaws and some other series, and there's definitely work that goes from London to here and vice versa. So share a little bit about your acting journey.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's great introduction. I love that, Mark. But yeah, my experience has been a crazy one. I've been acting since I was like 14 years old. And I was very fortunate that my mom sent me to stage school. And then from stage school, I got an agent. And then the ball started rolling from there. I started doing a lot of theater stuff. And then I got a big commercial. I'll never forget, I was about like 16, 17. And I got a commercial. And then obviously, you know, commercial money is great. And if you're coming from a Black background, especially, it's really great, because now we believe that maybe Andre should continue doing this thing. So started acting, and then I did more TV stuff. And then as the years went on, I just got better and better. I went to a lot of like acting classes, drama classes, whatever have you. And then also building up my CV. So then I've done lots of things with television. I've made lots of short films, commercials, theater, like I said. I did some tours as well. I did a great tour, and I went to Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It was like a great place where like a lot of UK actors go to like really strengthen their abilities. And we like did really well. Lot of 5-star reviews. Came back to London and we performed at Hackney Empire, which is one of the biggest theatres outside of the West End. So, and really well known and respected. And then after that, I just, you know, throughout my career, changed agents and whatever have you. As you said, mainly did a lot of stuff with BBC. I did a guest lead episode in Casualty, done some other short films that also, which I produced as well. So then so the producing kind of thing, I started producing in the last, I would say 5-6 years. And even before that, to be honest, I was making my own stuff. I didn't know I was producing at the time. I just wanted to make things with people that I had met in my career. And that's where the joy and the love, but also the frustration of it all came from, right? Because as I'm getting older in this career, I'm starting to realize like, oh my God, I've met some great people, but how do I make them connect again? And how do I connect people that I know would work great together on said idea? And then that's when I started to get better at my producing skills. So fast forward now, I've made a couple of shorts. Some are online. They've got millions of views. Some have gone to festivals, won loads of awards. And I'm building my career in that way as well. And then recently I worked on The Outlaws, which was done by Stephen Merchant. He wrote The Office, which a lot of Americans know, the American version, but there was a British version first. And then it was acquired by an American producer who then transformed it and turned it into what The Office that most people know. The American one is, I agree, the American one is better. Everyone says it, but not a lot of British people want to accept it. But I believe the American version is better. And I've watched both. And I worked on The Outlaws with Stephen. Stephen's a great guy, so funny, so hilarious. And he's so down to earth, but very honest. and he just gave me some real insight and just said, look, you've got to push both of them. Do you know what I mean? Both acting and producing, because ultimately, like he's done, he's really been able to carve out his career, because when the phone doesn't ring or things are not getting made, right? Who's going to cast this guy who's, I think he's 6'7", he's really, really nerdy. Not everyone's going to cast Stephen Merchant in a movie. He's not a leading man in the sense of the one to go to, the big muscles, hero looking guy. He's just not that guy, right? But he's still a great actor. And sometimes, even with my career, I look at it and I go, well, there's not a lot of shows, especially in the UK anyway, whereby characters that look and sound like me are at the forefront of the film or the TV show. It's just not realistic. I'm not saying it doesn't get made or doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen on a regular basis. So in knowing that, I'm like, how can I grow myself in a certain way? So how I end up in America is I apply for all these different scholarships and programs. And I get onto this program, which is funny enough, you mentioned Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Right. One of the execs of that show, his name's called David Lau. He's got a foundation called the David Lau Foundation, and he helps young upcoming creatives get access to all these different film, TV summits all over the world, right? And they get like different funds every year. So the amount of funds that they get every year will then determine how much places they can send you all over the place. And one of the places being NAFI Global in Miami. So based on that scholarship, me and another winner, Olu, shout out Olu, we were able to then fly out to Miami and get the experience of basically a lifetime. Because ultimately, without this scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to, one, afford just a ticket to go, and then just like accommodation, all that other stuff, right? So the scholarship allows you to get all this access to places and events that you might not be able to get access to on your own, not because of merit, but because of access, right? Just because of how financially expensive it all can be, right? If you want to go to MIPCOM, if you want to go to NAPI or whatever it is, right? It all costs a lot of money to buy tickets to go. So yeah, it's been a year of scholarship. I've been to Edinburgh TV Festival, different festivals and stuff, and I've had such a great experience because of it. So yeah, I hope that covers it. That's a lot.
It's interesting you mentioned the Edinburgh Festival, because one of the shows that we have here on the network, they're actually on hiatus, but Jeff Ahern, who is a conservative gentleman, but he does comedy and everything like that, he went to the Edinburgh Festival. I think it was about a year and a half ago. And like I said, he's gone through family life and just kind of like those family crises that we all go through at some point or another. So he was actually on hiatus, and I actually need to reach it back out to him to see when and if he's coming back and everything like that. But he's definitely was a fascinating guest, and hoping that he'll be coming back and everything in that space. I've got another guest. I got a couple of guests, but I want to bring on Mr. Parker, who has definitely dealt some stuff in dealing with criminal justice. And I know that some of your films and TV shows have been about criminal justice. And he's also talked about something that I know was a topic in our presidential speech on yesterday and everything like that. That's that whole notion of cancel culture. I'm not a big fan of folks being canceled either on the left or the right. And I know that definitely Sean talks about this whole notion of cancel culture in the arts, and that's one of his major current passions as well. So I want to bring him in so he can talk about even some of the representation of justice, because we know that there are different things that go on even in the way that law is covered, whether it's the American law or whether it's law and order kind of shows and things like that. So Sean, glad to have you on. And I know that you represent overseas as well, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines. So definitely share a little bit about your story and what you got going on, because I do know that you were very much involved in that whole notion of cancel culture and fighting against cancel culture.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Mark. Very nice to be here. Hi, Andre. I'm also in England. I'm in Sussex on the south coast, an hour and a half from London. And yeah, I'm an artist and a writer. Artist first, writer second. And this picture behind me is one of mine. And but I am very into cancel culture at the moment because of what it's done to our countries over the last 10 years. Fascination with that, with things like acting, with identity politics, and with basically being cancelled left, right, and centre because of what you say in public. And I'm quite keen on people being honest the last book that I wrote was A Delicate Balance of Reason last year. Uh, it was A Delicate Balance of Reason: Adventures in the Culture Wars, which does what it says on the tin. It's a bunch of sort of essays, observations put together about how these things are terrible for the arts. Being obsessed with your identity, whatever that identity is not looking out there into the world in order to engage with stuff, which is where better artistic creativity comes from, rather than always looking too much into yourself. It's all right a bit, but when you overdo it to the chronic degree and the politicization it was done, it can be really stunting. And I've spoken to various very interesting people on the subject, and I always try and keep a very open mind. People sometimes think I'm on the right because of that kind of angle, but I'm not. I'm apolitical. I just observe and I write like an artist, in my opinion, should do. So that's where I kind of come from.
That makes a lot of sense. I was learning from Andre and how he got involved in the arts as a youngster, and even myself. I know that my parents started a radio station when I was a preteen back in the mid 70s. It was a community-based radio station in rural North Carolina, so it's kind of what got me. I was working in newspaper even before then, but it definitely got me on this entertainment and the radio journey, as well as some degree the TV journey as well. So I was just wondering what exactly got you into media, and when did you first go on this journey? Because as definitely Andre was saying, he started at a very young age. I think his parents were encouraging him and all along those lines. So what got you into the arts, and were you one of those people that knew you wanted to be an author and a poet? Because I know you're a poet as well at a young age, or is it something that you discovered later in life?
Well, my dad was a drama lecturer at Exeter University here in the southwest, so I guess it was always steeped in to me. But because of my stammer, I'm a stammerer since the age of 5. I have various techniques and things, and it's the more I talk, the better it gets. I was very unconfident in acting, and I also knew quite early that it's very oversubscribed, right? And it's so very competitive place to be. I'm not great with competition. I like to go and do my own thing. And acting, I don't know, I'm just not a born actor. But that was always around me growing up. When I hit 14, I discovered like David Bowie, Prince, kind of Kate Bush, Public Enemy, all this stuff. And I mean that. It was a really interesting time, the late 80s, for independent music. It all crowded my imagination. I started to paint, to draw, and to make music. And so about 14, which is an opening time for loads of people, I started to write poetry and lyrics. And then it took me until 22 to go to art college. And 6 years later, my first album, and then that went to first book and first exhibition, that kind of thing. So 14 would be the answer to your question, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. For both of you, and I'm going to bring in another guest that actually comes from a different perspective, not so much the creative perspective and all along those lines. But at what point did you realize that you had this drive to want to be in the creative field? Did you think that you were born with it? Was it innate, or was it something that had to be nurtured? Because I know that that's a conversation a lot of people have, is whether we are doing enough globally to nurture creative talents and everything. And I know that some people get pushed into this notion of wanting to kind of like discourage people from being creative once they get into that work world, whatever that work world may be, and everything like that. So I was wondering, how much were you both encouraged to and nurtured in your creativity?
It's such a hard question because in the past it wasn't nurtured enough, and it was an elite sort of occupation, or it certainly that's how it seemed. Now we've got the internet. Everybody is and can be an artist, and so there's lots of stuff out there, for better or worse. Because the problem is things don't get seen, right, in the way that they used to. They don't have the streams. So you have to kind of create stories around it. You have to create an edge, and you've definitely got your own style. And that's so. Yes, people should always pursue those own things inside themselves and make the most out of them if they have an urge. Because I decided to do this when I realized that I wouldn't be happy doing anything else or any good at anything else. So at least with this, I know I'm always happy doing it. But the person who gets into it as a kid shouldn't be getting into it for any other reason but for doing it for themselves. If that works, if that conversation works, then if anything goes well, then great. And if not, supplant your career and your thing by doing whatever that you have to be a traffic warden or anything to pay the rent, and then go and take your pictures and act in your films when you can. It's kind of what we all do these days, as far as I'm aware. Lots of different sources of income just to survive and expression at the same time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about you, Andre? Because I know one of the things, I've got a number of friends that are here in the arts, including a dear friend that is a funk musician. He's also a Uber driver. So I know that a lot of people here wind up having to do what they call gig economy and kind of do those side gigs in order to survive. And I imagine it's the same thing in London as well. So even though you are doing production, you've been in some successful TV shows and all along those lines, but I imagine that sometimes things have to get lean and you have to wind up doing those gig kind of jobs and everything, even there in London. How does that your space?
Absolutely. Like, and I agree with Sean. It's a bit of a roller coaster, so it's ups and downs. But yeah, because I did it at a young age and I did it for the passion of it all, I started to definitely realize how competitive it is and all that kind of stuff, and just realizing how do I constantly create things and do things that is making me happy. Right. And even at this age, I'm always, as long as I understand that, I feel like that's really helpful. And then in terms of outside of acting and producing, making films, it's about using the capital that you make from what you love to then make other sources of income. So I've got into property, so I rent out some properties, and then I also do acting classes, and that I guess is the thing on the side that allows me to also then feed back into my career. And I think actors should also do other gigs and other jobs anyway, because it allows you to have more of a worldly view. Just acting all your life, I feel like you're not going to get much character out of that. But if you go away and you work somewhere, it might not be the best job in the world, but you work somewhere, you'll meet so much different types of people, and you can then draw from that and make stories. And some of the best stories that I've come up with or worked with people is because I've met someone working at NHS for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Do you know what I mean? It's about working with people that you might not always encounter. Working in a school, you meet some crazy teachers, right? And you hear some crazy stories, and you meet some students that got full of life and full of stories, and you can draw from all these experiences and these interactions. And I think that's what makes the art what it is. You know what I mean?
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to bring in another voice, and this time it'll be a female voice. Sometimes the mix is a mixture of sometimes more women than the guys, but this time I think she may be the sole female voice and everything, but she actually comes from a different perspective, which is that whole notion of communication and everything. Because I think whether it's acting or whether it's life in general, that is something we don't do enough of and everything. And I know that she is very much involved in the divorce space and all along those lines. And I know that at least here in the United States, it is a major problem and all along those lines. And I think that is one of the number one reasons people say that they get divorced, is that they don't have enough sense of communications. And even though I've got two actors here, and actors usually are good at communications, I think as a society, we are not the best at communications and everything like that. So if you want to put in some of your thoughts and some of the work that you're doing, because I know you even do a whole divorce workshop that centers around communications, which I think is a weakness in our American society.
Yes. Hello. It's nice to see all of you. I'm Jen Mitchell Love, and communication is very, very important. And it's not just communication, it's the authentic communication. It's people. I think a lot of times people don't give themselves the time and space to really figure out what their truth is and what they really want to communicate from their own soul's perspective, as opposed to what they think they should say or what the other person wants to say. And I think, the most effective communication is authentic communication.
Well, speaking of authentic communications, this actually comes to something that Sean was talking about earlier, but it plays into the whole conversation around divorce as well. Is I know even on this network, meaning Pod TV, I sometimes feel that people don't do enough listening. They do a lot of talking, but they don't do enough listening, and all along those lines. And sometimes they're not listening to the other side. It even kind of that whole notion of cancel culture and everything. While I have some friends that are part of the and acquaintances, including the kid of one of my exes and everything in that trans community, I do sometimes think that we sometimes find, whether it's racial boogeyman or whether it's now the trans boogeyman and things like that. So it plays into that whole cancel culture. So that's one of the things that frustrated me about the speech yesterday from our president here in the United States, was he seemed to be targeting quite often the trans community and all along those lines. So I just wonder your thoughts, Jen, and I'll bring in some other guests as well, about this notion of communication, but also listening to the other side.
Yeah, listening is very, very important. I always try to use the principle of we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should function in our life according to that proportionality. I think listening, the key to listening, at least in my space in the mediation, Zoom room, is really trying to shift perspective to really understand where that person is coming from. And I think the deeper understanding is we are all on our own journey of self, and we are all functioning differently. We have different belief systems. We have different ways of seeing the world, even if we're seeing the same experience or experiencing the same situation. 2 people have very different ways of looking at it. So I think that's kind of the key in the craft to listening, is stepping outside of yourself and giving that person room and space to share and really listen and do your best to try to understand where that person is coming from, kind of put yourself in that person's shoes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's your take on that, John? Because you did mention the cancel culture and everything like that, and it's always fascinating. I know that, as I mentioned to Andre, it's quite fascinating when I see some of these shows that have had tremendous American success that actually started there, whether it's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, whether some of the other shows as well. But I was just wondering your take on the cancel culture and how it's impacting our global community and everything. Because I don't think it's just impacting America. I think it's impacting all of the globe, and you kind of alluded to that even with what you've gone through.
Well, that was interesting. Listen to what Jen said about relationships there. Everyone's had a relationship, and it's of course it's one of the most personal things, and like what sort of occurred to me over the last few years is how some people just genuinely don't get on with each other. Whatever you do, however much you listen and however much else you do, some people just don't like each other, and so they can attempt to see it from the other point of view, but then it becomes almost impossible when they don't actually want to do that. How that extrapolates to the culture wars is tricky. Probably at home, it could split some couples up, where a person says, "Well, I quite sympathise with Amber Heard," and then the other guy or girl says, "Well, actually, I'm a bit of a Johnny Depp fan, actually." And I wonder how many of that kind of stuff comes in the studio, etc. Or so that's where it can get into the domestic realm. I'm sure there's been some very serious arguments about that. It was bloodthirsty a couple of years ago, for example.
Yeah, definitely. You have people that are arguing over what some people would consider trite things and all along those lines. So, Jen, how does that work even in your mediation? Because I know some people that might be, let's take Prince and Michael Jackson. There are some people that might have even got divorced over the fact that one might have liked Prince and the other might have liked Michael Jackson. But in a lot of ways, they both are very respectful musicians that have now gone on into heaven's world and everything like that. But they were respectful when they were living and had some great talents, but we had some great faults, like just all of us do in general and everything. But there were probably couples that literally broke up over that, just like they broke up over what movies they liked and everything like that. So how do you mediation? How do you deal with that? Because I do know that sometimes people are what to the outside looks as being trite, but to the couples is not all that trite.
Yes. I mean, my approach to divorce is very unique in that, I coach my clients in a situation like that, where they're being triggered by one another. I coach them that the contract of marriage is a legal contract for sure, but the bigger contract is the soul contract. And so, that scenario that you just presented, to maybe the 4 of us, maybe that wouldn't bother us, that our spouse likes something different than we did. But for the people that does bother them, I coach them, to recognize that the soul contract of marriage means your partner is the only person who can reflect to you the things that your soul came here to learn, which, is a beautiful gift. And anything that is triggering is really a blessing in many ways, because that triggering, it's not just, I like Michael Jackson, that's triggering the person. That might trigger them, but it has nothing to do with what the person is saying or doing. It's not externalized, and even what you referenced, politically, everything, it's not external, the key to it is shifting it and going within and asking, okay, how does that make me feel when I'm triggered? What feelings am I feeling? And maybe in that scenario where they have different musicians that they love, maybe it's a scenario of I feel like I'm not heard. I feel like I'm not valued. I feel like I'm not respected. And then I coach my clients to think about, okay, well, look throughout your entire relationship. What are other areas that you've been triggered? What has your partner done or said that has triggered you? But again, it's not the external. It's not what the person has said or done, because they're doing what they're doing and saying what they're saying, and it has nothing to do with you. The key and the magic and the gift is the reflection. How does it make you feel? And then I coach them to do this exercise all the way to childhood, and my guides have told me that, in that scenario where someone maybe doesn't feel heard or respected because their spouse is saying they like something different than them, in childhood, they felt that way as well. And then it's recognizing those beliefs came from, when you were 5 years old, maybe when you were trying to communicate and your parents weren't listening, and maybe they were doing a bunch of work or doing all these things and they didn't intentionally not listen to you. But that's an example of beliefs that we create in childhood that is the gift of divorce, really, and of partnership, anytime anyone is triggering us. But specifically with the divorce, the reflections that each person is giving, they're showing you your shadows. Whereas in the beginning of the relationship, there's a lot of light exchange. So you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love you. Like, you make me feel so good. You make me feel so beautiful and smart and amazing and all these things. And divorce, it's exposing the shadows.
What advice would you give to people? And this is for anybody who wants to jump in, and I'm going to bring in the two other guests in a minute as well. But what advice would you give to folks when there are, in some cases, and it comes down to communications, absolutes and all along those lines? Because I mentioned earlier that I had a ex that was very much not a fan of their child being in the trans community. And I think that they have somewhat learned to accept it, even though I don't know that they have fully accepted it and all along those lines because of their religious beliefs and everything. Because can be things that are very devout, and people have some very solid beliefs that sometimes their family members' belief systems or other systems may go against what they have been taught from a religious or a cultural standpoint. So how do you deal with that even in the divorce mediations where somebody may have what amount to like an absolute? I mean, there's this term of things that are like those things in relationships that are, you can't get past. I don't know if I get the term that I'm talking about, but there's like these things that people have that they can't get past it in their relationships. They will not accept that person for whatever those things are that are considered non-negotiables. That was the word.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting, Mark, because when you're sharing, this is like the third time you shared this, which means that you're very passionate. Number one, it means you're very passionate about this topic and about the way people are responding and talking about this topic, which is amazing and beautiful. Because that's the thing, is every person has their own soul's journey and path. Right. Every person has their own interests, and they're all amazing and they're all equally valid and great. What I coach my clients on is to recognize the distractions. Even when you're talking about it, Mark, it's a very charged energy, but it's heavy when you're talking about the other people who are doing things that you don't like. Yeah. And again, that's external, because we don't have control over what anyone else is saying or doing. We do have control how we respond and react to it. Yeah. So in my personal life, when people are doing things outside of me that aren't in alignment with my value system or my belief system, or it doesn't make me feel good, I don't give it any energy. Instead, I shift internal and say, okay, what do I want? What do I want in this space? Equality, love for everyone. I don't know why anyone cares what anyone does with their life. I spend zero time trying to figure why people say or do whatever because it's their life. They can do whatever they want. But what I coach my clients to is, you don't need the external are distractions from your life experience. You can live your life in the way that you want to live your life. And if you choose to live your life, from a space of love and evoking major change, which there's major change happening. I mean, everything that's going on externally, politically. I think it's intentionally happening to divide us and distract us. And I think the more that we can unify with recognizing that we are on our own journey of self, and that love and empowerment and growth and connection to self and others in the earth, that those vibrations energetically feel better. And the more we agree that we're all going to focus our energies on that, we're all going to create a new way of being and living. The more we're focusing on the things that bother us, the more we're staying in that space, and we're actually feeding it more energy.
Yeah, but Sean, you want to add something? I was going to bring in Alan as well, because I was also going to want to bring up another topic that is related, but not always related. But I did see your hand go up and everything. You want to add something, Sean?
Yeah, you said it was all right to jump in, so I thought I'd jump in quickly and say that very interesting from Jen, but she didn't talk about faith, because you said about faith and you're the family member, but you're not mentioning faith there, because that's almost a non-negotiable for many people, isn't it?
Right.
Well, that's a choice. I mean, faith, religion, those are all choices. People in the way I navigate life is people can make whatever choices they want, and if their choice in a faith is forcing them to think one way or do or say something, that's up to the individual to ask, do I feel good in this space? That has nothing to do, with me. My focus and my energy is spreading love into this world and empowerment and coaching people through their soul's journey and recognizing how powerful they are and recognizing how powerful thoughts are and words are and how we all have 1,440 minutes in a day. And that's the great equalizer for all humans. And the only differentiator is how you choose to spend those moments. And I don't spend my moments distracted by any of the external. I spend all of my moments fueling my energy into spaces to create containers for people for growth. And anything not in alignment with that, I'm not interested in giving any of my attention to.
I want to hear what Andre had to say, because I saw his hand go up as well. But on this show and other shows as well, one of the things that I found fascinating, my dad, who is not the most religious person in the world, he would probably say he's probably least religious person that he knows and everything. And I don't think that I'm speaking out of school by saying that about him and everything like that, even though as he's getting older, as anybody that gets older, you start contemplating what the next journey looks like and all along those lines. But he took me and my younger brother one time to watch one of the great American anchors. I don't think it was Walter Cronkite, because Walter would have been retired. It was probably either Peter Jennings or Ted Koppel. And they were looking, to your point, Sean, at all the great religions, whether they were Eastern religions or Western religions. And they found that they had a lot of commonality, which is love thy neighbor, love the respect Mother Nature, and a number of other things that were very common. Now, another commonality they had that they didn't mention as much in this particular TV show, which I sometimes regret, is that a lot of them, not saying all of them, but a lot of them also have a my way is the highway kind of attitude as well. And that can be where it becomes problematic in my mind, because they're thinking that it's only their way is the only way to get there and everything. And I personally, I'm not in a rush to get there, even though I'm 62, but I personally think that there will be a lot of shocked people whenever they get to Heaven's Gates or whatever the opposite direction is, because they might find people that they were expecting there, not there, and they might find a lot of people that they weren't expecting there that are there. But that's just my own personal philosophy. And like I said, I'm not in a rush to prove that anytime soon or anything, but that's just my own personal philosophy. But Andre, you wanted to add something, and then I wanted to hear from
I was just gonna echo what everyone else is saying. Really, yeah, it's true. It's just about adaptability for me. I feel like, yeah, you can really focus on the things that make us one and make us together, or you can focus on the things that are drawing us further apart, right? And I've seen and I've been witness to lots of couples or relationships whereby, yeah, they might have different faiths and stuff, but yet they still find a way to make it cohesively work. And there are people that do that all over the world. So it's like they've found a way to understand what are the things that bring these opposite faiths together. Do you know what I mean? And it's about seeing because I guess love will always win, right? That's one theme that's in every film. No matter what the show is about, love is always in that, right? Because love is no matter what this person opposite me believes in and has values, what if I love this person so much, I should be able to find the middle ground and find what brings us closer together, rather than oh, my mom's Muslim and my dad's a Christian, and you know what I mean? It's about like, why are they still together for all these years? It's because they found the love that they have between us, between those two couples, and kind of like what you said as well, Mark, which is like love thy neighbor and all these kind of core values which seem to be across all religions, right? So how can we not use those things more? And like Jen was saying, is that I feel like also I agree with this statement, is that the differences that we all see in the world is that's the way to keep us to drawn apart from each other, and that then creates groups, that creates war, that creates all these other things, that creates cancel culture. You know what I mean? Because your way is not my way is better than your way, and his way is not that way, and it's just like, well, who cares? Do you know what I mean? Like, why does that affect me? And that's one of my main questions when I get into these kind of conversations. It's like, why does that affect you? What so and so does with their self, what their gender is, or their race is, or like, why does that affect you? Like, what does that change about you? And it doesn't change anything. So it's like, you just got to accept this is what people want to do, their values and all that stuff. If it really is so harmful towards you, then you shouldn't be around it. But ultimately, you should always lead with love. If you're leading with love, I mean, there's a lot of things that just won't bother you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Alan,
Yeah.
wanted to hear some of your standpoints as well. The other thing that I know that I talk about quite a bit on this show, and I know it's something that you're passionate about as well, but it kind of plays into what we're talking about and everything. Everybody on this show, myself to some degree, are relatively self-confident and all along those lines, but we are all victims, myself included, when it comes to relationships. And this is kind of going towards what Jen was talking about, but also going toward the acting world as well. We all have our confidence, but we also have what many people call the imposter syndrome, and all along those lines. So I know that I can be my worst enemy. I can sometimes talk myself out of. I know I've talked myself out of jobs, whether that was in the arts world or other things. Almost talked myself out of going on to that trip in Miami, but I talked myself into not doing that, and all along those lines. But I've definitely talked myself, even at the age of 62, still in that perpetual single space, out of relationships and all along those lines, because I found all the reasons that it wouldn't work and everything like that. So I was just wondering, and maybe you want to jump in, Alan, how we can get past that imposter syndrome, because it is something that impacts us, whether you're an actor, whether you're an author, or whether you're a life or divorce coach, or even with the kind of work that you do. So how have you dealt with that, Alan, and just your thoughts around this conversation in general?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes up for me is the difference between the social world and the real world. Mm-hmm. So the metaphor I use is there's the wedding photos on Instagram. They all look great, but the marriage doesn't always look great behind the scenes. Similar to you, Jen, I coach couples. My girlfriend and I, we do relationship talks coaching. We have several different couples that we coach, and it's more of helping them achieve their goals and dreams together. And then I coach business owners as well. And so when you get behind the scenes of so many different people from all over the world, I track everything. I'm an engineer, so all the metrics are tracked. I'm coming up on my 10,000 hours of coaching, training, and podcasting now, even though I look 15. But ultimately, when you get behind the scenes with so many people, you realize that there's no one who's not struggling, just not everyone's struggling with the same thing. Some people are really good with self-belief and self-efficacy and their ability to achieve in the real world, and they're very competent and capable, and they do believe in themselves a lot. But then socially, they feel awkward at the barbecue. They make other people insecure because maybe they're in really good shape or really good looking or really confident. And then there's other people that are really good in the social world and are a lot of fun, but behind the scenes, they're really unhappy and unfulfilled. And so what I've found is, how do you merge and integrate the social status world with the real world? And I like the inside out approach. I want to focus on the marriage first in the real world, and then hopefully my Instagram will also look great, versus what a lot of people do is try to make it look really good when in reality, deep down, it's not great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is both you, Alan, and Jen. I am oftentimes fascinated, and if the actors want to jump in as well, we sometimes put limitations on ourselves, and sometimes the limitations can be silly limitations. Everything. I remember in one of my earlier dating periods and everything, there was a young lady that used to visit me and everything along those lines, and I would sometimes let the fact that she had a blemish, I think it was a freckle or something like that, on her nose bother me and everything. But then there have been times that I have stepped out of what would be considered my norm and everything, because I have no tattoos of my own, no earrings and everything. But one of the people that is in my social life now, they are full of tattoos and all along those lines. And I am finding that I'm not going to let that stop what could be a potential relationship. While the relationship develop, and if it develops into something, then I'll deal with that at that particular time. But I know a lot of times people put limitations on what they will allow in their life. And I know some people will be like, nope, not going to deal. Because the younger Mark would have been like, heck no, you got tattoos, you got the earrings, I'm not talking to you, and everything like that. But they have other parts of their personalities that make it worth at least exploring and everything. So what is your thoughts around that to my coaches? Because I know sometimes people will put limitations on themselves.
Well, Jen, I know you probably have a great answer for this. The first thing I would say is those are vanity metrics. Those are vanity metrics, right? I was, blonde, tall, good, whatever. I had all these vanity metrics. My beautiful girlfriend and future wife is brunette, so I used to make decisions in relationships based on looks and sexual attraction, and that did not work. That actually worked terribly. And then, Jen, I know you've mentioned the soul's journey. When I started doing the inner work, therapy, and I started understanding myself, I said, you know what? I'm never going to make my decisions for an intimate relationship based on just sexual attraction. Yeah, you got to be attracted. Let's be real. But that can't be first. That can't be first on the list. So, and then ironically, I ended up with the most beautiful, woman ever. So I went for soul, mind, body. It's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. It used to be physical first for me when it came to intimate relationships. And then after that, it was like, this isn't working. I have to change. And now I go mental, emotional, and spiritual first. And then I somehow ended up with the most beautiful woman. And I mean, it's just unbelievable, but it's very different than the vanity metrics that I used to have back in college.
Yeah, I want to hear Jen's thoughts around the vanity metrics, but the opposite side of that, and I'd love to hear definitely Andre's thoughts about this as well, is that sometimes it can be what I call like a reverse notion and everything, because I know that there are, and I'm not trying to knock my sisters and everything, but there are a number of sisters out there that will get upset if you are even looking at somebody that is of the opposite race and everything along those lines, because they have this notion that you have to keep it within your own framework and everything like that. So I just wondered, as one that probably has some African roots in addition to being from London, if you run across that, Andre, and everything, because I do know some folks that are, and my dad actually dates and they've been together longer than he was with my mom, a Jewish American woman and everything. So she's definitely not in the same light skinned African American space that I am in and everything, and that he's in as well and everything like that. So I just wondered, is that something that you face? Because even on this network, I know that there's a young lady that if they mention the fact of a brother dating a white woman, they start having like hissy fits, for lack of a better term, and everything like
that. What's my my take is, I think love is love. I think you whatever you want, you know what I mean? And everyone has preference, right? I've grown around a lot of black women, so all I've liked is black women, right? I've traveled around the world, I've seen different kind of women all over the world, right? And I can appreciate a race and go, oh, that woman's really good looking, or whatever have you. But I guess ultimately I still go back to, or I find myself going back to the women that's the kind of women I kind of started out like attracted to. I can understand why, I understand how these conversations come up, and like I always say, there's a Dr. Umar in me as well, which is like, I understand why the importance of it. Like I understand the economics behind why people have these kind of conversations. So I don't just think it's about love. I also understand that there's an economics to why we should also date within our own, date our own, for example, because that is what a lot of other races do. And unfortunately for us as black men, we are not doing the same. Our percentage is much, much lower. And we have to ask ourselves also within, why are we so quick to marry outside our race? Why don't we marry within our race, right? And there's a lot of psychology that goes with that, and a lot of trauma that goes with that is attached to that, which we need to break. I do think love is love, and I think you should, wherever you want to go ahead and do that. And if you want to explore, for example, like you mentioned, a woman that you might not normally date, you want to try a thing out, then do you know what I mean? Where I come from in London, we say try a thing, do you know what I mean? Just try it and see how what it comes and what what can come from that. And then again, if you're leading with love and you're just exploring your soul, your inner man of yourself and your spirit of yourself, and you're trying to figure out what you like and what you don't like, well, the only way to do that is actually just to try it out. So yeah, that's my overall view. But again, with me personally, it has always been black women. But some of my friends have been with other races, white women, Asian women, whatever, and I think those can still be great matrimonies as well. I don't think you should be restricted, but I also understand both plays. Like, I understand the economic side of it, and let's be really honest and realistic. Is that relationships is not just all lovey-dovey, like we mentioned before. This is also an economic thing as well, right? The person you choose to be with for the rest of your life is also, there's a lot that goes with that. And often, like we all know, divorce is the highest rate of divorce, and the reason of divorce is often economics, right? So we have to recognize that at the beginning of it, it's all about love and all these kind of stuff. But when you go more and more into a relationship, there's other factors that play into that. So yeah,
that makes
I hope
sense.
that makes sense. I hope I answered the question.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Hey, Jen, the flip side of that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, and actually Alan kind of alluded to it and everything. We were talking about that vanity matrix. Because I don't know that the vanity matrix is always the same for men as it is for women, because I do know some women in my life circle and everything that want the guy to have a certain kind of car or a certain kind of job or a certain kind of this or that and everything along those lines. Not saying that all women are that way, but I also remember a book that my mom had, and I think she may still have the book, but the title of the book was What Men Know About Women. And if you open the book was basically empty. So the book had 50 pages because it was basically the notion that we have no clue what y'all are thinking at all along those lines. And I found that book hilarious. I think my younger brother found it hilarious as well, because it was totally full of empty pages. I don't think there was a word written in the book at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think this conversation is so interesting on so many levels. The way that, I see things, and from being a family law attorney for 19 years, and learning the stories of what happened and why, and I think firstly, I think people attract people into their lives that are aligned with their belief systems. So, it's so interesting because I just finished a mediation right before this, and the woman was talking about her childhood. And in her childhood, they were struggling for money, and everything was always very stressful and tight. And her dad, didn't bring in a lot of money and was losing jobs and all of these things. And here I am. I didn't know her as a child. Here I am guiding them through the divorce journey. And her husband, is soon to be ex-husband, is reflecting that same energy. So out of all the men in all the world that she could have attracted to herself, she chose and attracted into her life space a man who replicated what her father was doing, and the energies that she grew up with. So I feel, people and for, Mark, the woman who, is saying, I'm going to attract a man who has a big 401k and a fancy car and yada, yada, yada. Maybe that was that woman's experience in childhood, or maybe she's just saying that because that wasn't her experience and that's what she wants. But the truth of it is, she's not going to attract a man like that unless her inner self, her energy within, is aligned with that vibration of abundance and of wealth. And Andre, I love you. And I love when you shared your share, because it was really beautiful. And I think that is, I think it also represents a lot of the beliefs that are passed down to us from our parents are passed down to us from, they were passed down from their parents. And so this conversation is so much bigger than just the one person and what type of person are they attracting, because this really is a lineage, generational lineage, ways of being and ways of believing and patterns that just continue to replicate over and over and over again. And I think, the the main reason people get a divorce, and people ask me this all the time, why do people get a divorce? What is the number one reason? Is it infidelity? Is it money? What is it? And I think it's not, those could be, byproducts of it. But I think the real heart, reason is when people are growing at different rates. One person is choosing to continue to grow and push, him, her, theirselves outside of their comfort zone, learn more about who they are and what they want. And, just kind of learn more about the magic of this universe, getting out of the cages and the programs and ways of being. And the other person isn't really interested in that. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because there's no good, bad, right, or wrong. It just is what it is. But that is what I have seen to be and I think, when that happens in a couple, when that happens in a relationship, that means that the contract has been fulfilled. You've learned everything you were meant to learn from this person. They've learned everything they were meant to learn from you. And now you're meant to, release the attachments to that relationship space and hopefully go to a space of friends or cheerleaders for one another, reaching their highest and greatest version of self and attracting love and joy into their life. But there's other people that we're meant to connect with. I think a lot of times people get so
there's more than one
stuck.
soulmate and everything. But I did have a question, because there's this mythology, or at least I think it's a mythology, but maybe the you two life coaches, and I'll bring in Sam as well, and he'll be the last guest. But I was just wondering people's thoughts about this, because I know that within divorce and within relationship, there's this thought that you should be able to escape and get by anything and all along those lines. How many of us have not heard this story? And it's a question that is oftentimes asked in relationships. If the person is able-bodied, for lack of a better term, and everything, and in a car crash, will you be able to survive and deal with that person if they are then incapacitated, like they're in a wheelchair? I know that is a conversation that is oftentimes put out in relationships, and not everybody has those answers. I can proudly say that so far, and this will be his third relationship, my brother has gone through a lot of stuff, because he's dealing with MS, and his girlfriend has a new heart, and they are still very much in together and are still, as best I can tell, a couple, but they've gone through some hard times and everything like that. And I don't know that everybody can put up with that, even though that's one of the things I oftentimes hear people say in relationships, is that you should be able to deal with the person if there is a sudden change, like they are in a car wreck and they're not able to walk, or they've lost their legs or their limbs and everything. But is that a truism, and should you be able to do that, or is that one of those, as I called it earlier, mythologies and everything like that? Because I know a lot of people will be like, yeah, I can just love that person no matter what happens to them.
The metaphor that I've found is most helpful for me personally, and then we have a podcast called the Conscious Couples Podcast. So it's basically taking the unconscious and making it conscious, which is a lot of what this conversation is. And we're trying to help people have, basically, to Jen's point, you're either growing together or you're growing apart. And a lot of times there's one partner who has a stronger growth orientation. And when that happens, you feel sometimes like you're dragging someone up a mountain they don't want to climb. And so you might have to snap. There's a rule called the 1 in 60 rule. If you're 1 degree off on an airplane, when you're 60 miles down, you're a mile off course. So maybe it was aligned for a time, but you're either diverging or converging. And sometimes it's like this. Most likely it is like that, right? And so effective communication, humility, courage, vulnerability, these are things that I think are critical. But the metaphor that I've found most helpful is when I was in my early 20s, I drove from Boston to LA. And I use this all the time for this idea of goals in conflict, core values in conflict, and beliefs in conflict. That's the main issue. So a goal in conflict is, imagine my girlfriend and I both want to go to LA. Okay, common goal. We're good. Now we can take the same car. Okay. Core value in conflict would be, she loves screamo music and I love country music. Now we can't take the same car without being upset the whole time, right? And then a belief in conflict is there's a southern route, there's a northern route, and there's a middle route, and she wants to go through the mountains and the Rockies and the northern route, and I don't like the cold. So she believes we should take a different course. Now, with Emilia and I, we're super aligned in terms of core beliefs, core values, and core aspirations, core goals. But if you don't have those things in common, and when we evolve and we grow and we overcome our conditioning and our trauma and our childhood, we evolve as an individual, your core values and core aspirations and your core beliefs change, they evolve. And when one partner's changing and evolving and the other one is not, it's very, very difficult to make that work without some catch up or the desire to make that growth a thing. And so I agree 100% with what Jen said. From my experience behind the scenes with hundreds of individuals, couples, singles, all this stuff, it's very, very clear that when one partner amps up growth, they start learning, they start a new fitness journey, now they're listening to podcasts, they're doing all this work, the other partner sometimes gets really insecure, and that actually stagnates, and they're trying to hold their partner back unconsciously because they're so afraid. And so their fixed mindset really ruins and sabotages the relationship a lot of times. Whereas if they were actually humble, courageous, and vulnerable, they could say, listen, I'm afraid you're going to outgrow me. And then the other partner would be like, thank you for admitting it. Let's actually grow together and see if we can make this thing work. And then after that, we can decide whether or not we want to take separate cars in this metaphor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jen, what's your take? And I definitely want to hear from Sam as well so he can jump into the conversation and bring his insight into what he's into and everything. I was going to share with y'all, I learned that notion about the distance and separation, ironically, from a newspaper job, because I had I still can somewhat be the crush kid, and I'm just going to be admitting what I can be. I can be the one that falls into crushes left and right and all along those lines. And as the crush kid, I had a young lady that I thought was an amazing relationship. They lived, ironically, because that's where I met Andre at that conference in Miami. They lived in Miami. I took a job in Boca Raton. At the time that I took the job, I was thinking that Boca Raton to Miami would be like just down the road, like around the corner and all along those lines. But I learned that it is still several hours away to get from Boca Raton, which is close to West Palm Beach, to Miami. So we never actually got together because I'm thinking that because I'm moving from North Carolina to Florida, I am moving very much closer to her. And yes, I was moving closer in the sense of being in the same state, but I was still hours apart and all along those lines. And it was a borrowed car that I was using or a jalopy at the time. So it wasn't necessarily going to get down the road anyway to Miami and all along those lines. But at the time I'm like, oh yeah, I'm getting closer. But no, it wasn't that close.
I think in your example, where you asked, is this a myth or is this true about the wheelchair? I think there's a lot of programming when it comes to relationships and specifically marriage, till death do you part. There are good years and bad years. Marriage is a compromise, and I think those programs are just so prevalent in our human consciousness. You should do this. If this happens, if your husband gets in an accident and is in a wheelchair, you should stay with him, and I think every person is on their own journey. And the way that we best serve one another in relationship and in the world, but specifically in relationship, is by being 100% authentically honest with one another, and remove those programs. And that is part of the shattering, that is happening in our human consciousness right now, really. I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, but there is a shift from the third dimension to the fifth dimension that is happening right now. And there is a reason why the third dimensional energies they're getting more and more and more intense, like World War III, it's like,
I don't understand what you're talking about.
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting. It's so exciting, Sean, because you're living too. So all of us have chosen to be here during this time. And if you Google it,
I haven't chosen to be here. I was just born.
You were, but in my world, we chose to, with the shift to the fifth dimension, right? And going back to religion is religion, right? And everyone, if they so choose, can pick a religion. I love, Andre and Mark, both of you recognizing that the heart and root of all religions is love. Mm-hmm. That is the root of everything, is love. And we could have a whole nother conversation for days about religion and what has happened over the progression of time with religion and with regards to what it has done to people that have made the choice and decision to be within that religion, as far as sovereignty, as far as living as a sovereign being and making your own choices in this world based upon your inner guidance and truth, as opposed to what you have been programmed, not you, Sean, I'm just talking about in general, what people have been programmed to believe that they must do to be a good person, or this is bad, or this is right and this is wrong. There is no good, bad, right, and wrong. It just is what it is. And we are all here to experience this beautiful life experience. I mean, all of us today probably have eaten something that was really tasty and amazing. You know, I started my day at the gym and I was able to swim and laps and sit in a hot tub and a sauna and meditate and do breath work. I'm able to interact with my children. I'm able to go outside, feel this beautiful sunshine on my face. You know, I mean, life is such a beautiful gift. And I feel like the programs telling us that we must do something, you know, we must stay with our husband if he gets in a car accident and is in a wheelchair. It's like, well, what if I don't want to? Because it's my life.
But
It's my life.
hold on a second, Jen. I was going to bring in Sam because ironically, in his profile on Matchmaker, he actually talks about what you just said, because I love this quote that he has and everything. And I want to hear from Sam and everything, because Sam has autism, but he says that he is not broken. You know, a lot of people think of themselves as being broken. And one of the things he says in his profile is that he does not need to be fixed. He's a successful podcaster, and he has a show called Autism Rocks and Rolls. So he's a teenager living with autism, but as he says himself, but I'll let him speak for himself, he doesn't feel that he has to be fixed. And I do think that sometimes, even as people, because I know that I can be what people call a fixer, and all along those lines, there's this notion that we have to fix people no matter what their problem is and everything. But Sam, you say that you don't have to be fixed no matter what your autism is, and all along those lines. So if you share a little bit about your story, and I know you've been in the background listening to this entire conversation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts around this notion, because I know a lot of people think that they have to fix somebody that's broke, kind of like what Jen was talking about. Can't hear you, Sam. I don't hear you. Yeah, I'm not. Your mic's not working. I don't know what's going on with the mic. Might have to see if we can get the mic adjusted. Check your settings and everything, because I'm not hearing you at all. Yeah, so hopefully he'll come back and we'll hear from him and everything along those lines. But go ahead and finish again while we try to see what's going on with Sean's with his mic and everything.
Okay, I mean, I just feel, and that's again, you know, the external. It's like people don't need to act or do or be anything. It's like if everyone stopped externalizing and judging and labeling every person and their actions and just stayed within their own lane and really figured out, who am I and what do I want and how do I want to make other human life better? What gifts do I have to share with the world? You know what I mean? I think the programs we have outgrown them as a human consciousness. And I think we can do better. I think we can acknowledge that everyone is on their own journey of self and can do whatever they choose to do. It has nothing to do with anyone else. If a woman or a man wants to stay with their partner after they've been in a car accident and they're in a wheelchair, amazing. And if they don't want to stay with their partner after they've been in a car accident in a wheelchair, amazing. You know, it's no one else's business or life. It's that person's life and choice. And I think if we could remove the social programs and really just truly live from a space of authenticity, of this is who I am and this is what I want to share with the world. And I'm not programmed or put in any cage saying that I need to do this, or I must be here at this time, or I must do this job for another person. This is truly what I want to gift to the world. Everything would just flow so much better, and it would be a space of love.
Speaking of authenticity and everything along those lines, and hopefully Sam will be able to come in and we can hear him and everything. But just really quickly, this is for everybody. One of the things with authenticity that I'm oftentimes fascinated by, but I'll start with you, Andre, and then hopefully we'll get Sam in as well, is this notion of understanding our worth and everything like that. Because I know that a lot of times we, particularly in the arts, don't even accept our worth, and sometimes we shortchange ourselves and all along those lines. I've got a good friend of mine that talks about everybody's a promoter. He's one of my best friends, but he talks about how everybody's a promoter and it's time to cut the check because everybody's got these great ideas, but they don't always have the resources behind the great ideas. And sometimes we also give away a lot of knowledge as well. A friend of mine, and I know that several of y'all are podcasters like I am and everything, but this same friend talks about the brain drain, where we allow a lot of information to go out without necessarily getting any rewards with it. And I know actors are notorious for trying to get those bit parts that oftentimes they might not get paid for, but I'm thinking you were not having that, Andre. You were going to make sure that you were getting your rewards and everything like that. So definitely, I just wanted your take on that.
I think my main take is kind of like what Jen said about being programmed, and it's about going against the grain. And I feel like I've always had that mentality from a very young age, right? So I've always believed that I can always get more if I value myself. And if I decide that this is my value, then I gotta make everyone in the room recognize this is my value. I still think actors gotta learn that. And it's one of my agents when I was really young told me the most strongest thing you can say is no. Right. So if you're not sure about if you're not for it, say no. Like and be strong about your yeses and be really strong about your nos. So I feel like your value is important. And the way you grow your value in any kind of space is to recognize what you bring to this table and be very sure about what you bring to the table, and be really sure about it, because then that in that sense your value then goes up, right? So that's the way I see it, right? Even with Sean with his art piece, if Sean decides that his art piece is worth 10 grand, then it's worth 10 grand. Now he just has to prove to everybody why it's worth 10K, right? And that's how you end up with those emojis on the blockchain of the little cat getting sold for 10 grand. Because someone decided that's how much it's worth. And then they proved it to everybody around the world. And then someone paid for it. And that's just how it goes, right? And someone's making a load of money and someone is like, you know what I mean? And it's the value system. But someone has to decide in that conversation that this t-shirt is worth $20 or $150. And the difference is between the two t-shirts is that one has a little Gucci sign and one doesn't.
Real quick, I just want to thank everyone.
I do want to hear from Samuel, and I can't actually hear Samuel now and everything. So Samuel, I was saying that you made that statement about that you didn't have to be fixed and everything, and I just found that to be so wonderful, because a lot of times people are trying to repair people. That's part of what we've been talking about, even if they are having handicaps and all along those lines, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, or whether it's mental. But when I read that profile of yours in Matchmaker, you were like, I don't need to be fixed. I just need to be supported and everything. So if you share a little bit about your thoughts around this conversation we've been having.
All right. So let's try this again. And I was going to meet everyone that's been on the call. I've been hearing a lot. There's definitely been some good insight. But I guess I'm going to my information on what I do real quickly. But what I do is I run a podcast on autism that tries to change the view of autism and just trying to really change the view of population that gets ignored way too much. But you talk about being authentic. Yeah, I'm authentic. And from a personal standpoint, I'm not the best with people pleasing. I think that's personally why I've had a struggle with relationships as a whole. I'm not just talking about with dating. I'm talking about with friendships in general too, because I tried people pleasing for 15 years and it led me to the hole. It didn't work out too well. I be myself, and if you don't like it, in my view, I don't care how important you are to me. That's a you problem, not a me problem. But Jenny, you were talking about how kind of like this relationship ordeal with people kind of growing apart because of similar personalities. I'm not kidding you. I had that exact similar experience, except it wasn't with a girlfriend or anything like that. It was with a friend who happened to be female, and I won't say her name just out of privacy, but the kicker was with her, we had, looking back on because we did have a falling out, and looking back at our relationship, I think why we fell out was because she was very similar to me, and I saw myself in her.
Yep. Go ahead. You were saying you would continue.
Oh, you want to continue?
Yeah.
That's what I thought with Jen. But talking about authenticity too, I also believe you need to be authentic in life because you shouldn't really have to hold your fort for anyone. I lived happily pretty well for most of my life. Have I made some enemies and, pardon the French, but piss a lot of people off? Yeah, but how does it affect me in the long run? There's more success for me still than them. Because not them liking me, I don't have time to worry about that. I got other stuff to do that are more relevant than worrying about a person's opinion about me.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Andre, if you're still on there, one of the things I get everybody to do on the show, so hopefully you can do it as well, but all the guests, and I know I had one that left before, I try to give them to give a message of positivity and as well as a way that they can be reached. And I know you've been on several of those shows and everything like that. So hopefully Andre is still there and he can give us a message of positivity and all along those lines, because I know he's got to get out and go to another meeting and everything like that. So if he's there, I definitely want to hear his message of positivity and how he can be reached and all along those lines, and anything that he didn't get to that he'd like to get to, and then we'll continue the conversation for a few more minutes. He might have already left, but I'll reach out and we'll find a way to get in touch with him and folks and get in touch with him and learn about the different things that he's been on. He mentioned several of them and all along those lines, but we'll definitely hear from him and try to connect him with the audience with him as well, because I can put that in the liner notes also as well, or in the notes that go on with the show and all in that space. But definitely, what made you get your show, Samuel, just in terms of wanting to do one on autism and all along those lines? Because like I said, you've been doing this, and I don't know how long you've been doing it, but what made you decide that you wanted to do a show centered around autism? I know a friend of mine has got a thrift store where I think all the workers are in that autism space, and they are actually raising funds to help people with their autism journey.
Well, being autistic myself, I've had a lot of personal challenges, and a lot of times in my stories, you had to either be there and understand it, or my explanations wouldn't make sense when I explained it, and no one listened to me for 15 years. Well, I'll create a podcast platform. Guess what people do naturally? They listen.
Right.
Luckily, I got a lot of people listening to 21.3K downloads. It's just, I never expected that much people wanting to listen to me.
You got more people expecting that and everything like that, then that's positive. And
it's a positive attribute. It's just, I'm surprised.
Yeah. Jen, how are you doing on your show? Because I know you've got a podcast as well. And how is that going? Is comparable to what Samuel's doing? And how is it going with talking about relationships? I know a lot of yours deals with divorce and relationships just in general.
Yes, thank you. It's called Divorce with Love. And I've recorded 2 episodes. I have an editor, but I haven't released them yet. So everything is very, very new. And we're going to be, my first guest is a breathwork and shamanic practitioner, where we talk about soul contracts, and he guides listeners through a breathwork exercise. And yeah, it's really, really exciting. And then the second one is with a woman who spent the majority of her life, 60 years in Peru and India. And with her, we're talking about similar. I mean, my whole mission with the podcast, and I have a new book out that's called Shine, Soul, Shine, is really to shed light on a different way of looking at divorce. Because as a former litigation attorney, being in the court system for 9 years, and then the last decade being out of court as a mediator, I've really come to realize that the way people are approaching divorce is very external, like we talked about earlier. He did this, she said this, and gossiping with their friends, and, getting in this space where the real gem to the divorce is going within. It's one of the most emotionally difficult experiences of your life. And in that space, it's imperative to take really good care of yourself, and that would be my loving message for your listeners is take good care of yourself, unapologetically. Because that's another program. If you put yourself first, you're being selfish, and being selfish is bad. You're a bad friend, you're a bad mother, bad father. It's like, no, you need to take care of yourself. So put yourself first, take good care of yourself, give yourself what you need, figure out who you are and what you want, get back into the light when you're going through dark times, and allow your soul to shine. Allow your gifts to be shared with this world, and stay out of the distractions, stay out of the external, because You are not in control of anything or anyone outside of us. And if anyone is interested, come join me in the fifth dimension, and we can create a whole new earth that is rooted in love and empowerment and growth and connection, and where all of these systems that are completely outdated and broken, and no one on this podcast or anyone listening can, I think, argue differently. You know, the education system, in my expertise, the legal system, the medical system, the political system, all of the systems we have outgrown as a human consciousness. They're serving a very small percentage of people. And the energies of those systems are, you know, greed and fear and control. It's, whoever wants to stay in that, go for it. But I'm shifting out. I'm, you know, collaborating with fellow fifth dimensional beings of light and spreading love and creating all new ways of doing things that are benefiting the whole, and that again are rooted in love.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, Samuel, along those same lines and everything, how important, even in your own career, has it been to be for folks to either be empathetic with you or for you to develop your own sense of empathy and everything? Because that is a term that I've heard a lot of people talk about, even on this network and just in general, having sympathy or empathy. And I know you said you don't have to be fixed, and I agree with that and everything. But how important do you think it is for people to be empathetic to what you are going through?
Well, this is going to sound like a really unfair answer, but it's true. We would appreciate empathy if we could, because there are some behaviors on the autism spectrum that people, I think, don't understand. I don't think those understand why we're not good at plan Bs, or we have, as I call it, foot and mouth syndrome. And we just said stuff that are completely, really off the bat, really truthful. And we probably should have said that at that moment. I'm sure Jen has probably had a lot of people do that during her sessions. But I'm probably not wrong. But anyway, I was thinking here, don't expect it back, though, because those on the spectrum, and I'm not trying to be a jerk when I say this, have no sympathy for people. And I say it because we'll tell you how it is straight up. You don't like it, the door's right there.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
But we make it with our compassion.
Yes.
There's interactions.
Yes.
There's a reason why I prefer hugs over handshakes. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That
Totally.
makes a lot of sense and everything. Hey, Samuel, how do you think autism has been covered? Because I know a lot of times we were talking even earlier to Sean about cancel culture, and I know that there is a lot of times that there have been movies that have attempted to address all the autism, whether it was Forrest Gump or whether it was some other movies back in the day and everything. So how have you felt that Hollywood and the TV industry has done with dealing with this very real issue?
Well, I wanted to chime in with cancel culture, but my microphone was kind of acting up on me. But to give your thoughts on that, with cancel culture, I actually kind of like having that, because I didn't know what it was. Actually, I'll be 100% honest. I did a little research while you guys were blabbing about it, and it sounded like it was basically speaking up about the topic or whatever it is. And that's great, because there's some places, if you try to do it in other countries, it's not going to work. North Korea, you try to talk about Kim Jong-un in the worst way possible, what's happening? Your head's going to get blasted off. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to America, in particular, we can have that privilege. And in my opinion, and I won't lie, some privileges have been better than others. But I will admit their heart's in the right place. It's just some aren't 100% accurate. The Rain Man movie, I watched it, and that ain't 100% accurate. A good movie to watch that shows a representation of autism is Temple Grandin. That movie will show you what we're thinking. Hey, you guys know my movie spoilers, do you?
No, not at all.
Okay, cool. One scene is pretty much her aunt was telling her, we get up at the crack of dawn with the roosters, right? Well, in her brain, she's thinking she literally gets up with the roosters and goes cock-a-doodle-doo with them.
Wow. Thinking that she's going to have to do the same thing with the roosters as the roosters did, and all along those lines. What's your take on that, Sean? Because I know that that's a lot of what you deal with and everything. And by the way, you're not getting out of here, because I've had other poets as well. So you will have to give me, before we get out of here in the next 15, 20 minutes, a sample of your poetry.
Oh, no
Oh,
way.
yes.
Not sure about that. Well, I mean, I'm surrounded by experts in their field, aren't I? And fascinating hearing about autism from Samuel. I've had lots of friends on the spectrum somewhere. I've suspected that I am myself at sometimes because I have a great attention to detail and that kind of thing. But when you talk to people who really know their stuff, it sounds stupid talking about yourself in that way. So this whole spectrum of things. I'm sure that Samuel, I love the straight talking aspect of life where I come from, as does Jen, right? And that's coming from another point of view of straight talking, which is be yourself, even if you're called selfish. And it's a very, very empowering way to live. Being I'm an individualist for sure, but then when you get 2 billion people in China who, if they do that, are in a very different outcomes than we are, and in the Islamic world, another story of that. When you bring the politics in, it's difficult for the fifth dimension, which I'm obviously going to have to investigate. So, I mean, I've just been listening and trying to pick up on stuff because such diverse views, and two of the guys are gone. So it's like listening to Sam now.
There's
Yeah.
no political system in the fifth, Sean. That's the
No.
thing about it. Like what you're saying is it's exactly in alignment. You know, what you're saying, you know, is the political systems shun people for being themselves or speaking their truth or speaking out of the place of the masses, you know, because those people are, to the third dimensional, the powers that be, that small percentage that is monetarily benefiting off of this, and probably ego from their ego standpoint too. They don't want us to talk about a contrary way of looking at things, especially when the contrary view of looking at things is actually love. It's bringing people together, because they don't want us together either. They want us fat, stupid, disconnected, and scared. That's the favorite 4-part, you know. So it's exactly, and I just looked up your art and I love what you're doing. It has a really cool vibe. And art is has a very powerful space in the fifth, whereas in the third, you know, artists aren't valued very much. You know, it's like, oh, they're an artist. Like, it's like they're receiving messages from the ether, and they're creators. That's what humans are here to do, is create. And art and music and poetry, which I can't wait to hear some poetry, but all of those forms of expression are so powerful, especially when people can step back and be like, oh my gosh, that's just one person's way of looking at it. How beautiful that's how Sean sees the world. How interesting that's how he sees the world. And then giving people that space for everyone to be there. And I love Samuel, what you were sharing. And I'm not autistic, and I feel exactly the same with regards to empathy and sympathy and compassion. You know, I feel I'm extremely empathetic in the sense that I can feel energy. I can know what someone is thinking without them even opening their mouth. And I trust the energy that I feel in a human being more than I trust most times, unless I know that they're authentic and speaking truth. The words that come out of their mouth, if they're out of alignment. I think giving people, when people are like, oh, you should be more sympathetic or more empathetic, it's like, I'm not going to feed energy into victimhood, because nothing is happening to anyone. It's not happening to them. It's happening for them. And I have no idea what this soul is here to do. I have no idea the past life karma. I have no idea their upbringing. And I'm not here to say anything about anyone's choices and doing anything. I can give them love. I can listen, you know, I can be compassionate and give them a hug and share with them, you know, I understand you're going through a really hard time and I'm here to give you love. That's exactly Shine Soul Shine. It's 30 days towards self-discovery and healing in divorce. You know, it's spoken through the voice of a divine feminine goddess energy, which is, you know, feminine energy. We lead with our heart, and we're collaborators, and we're focused on children, you know, whether we have, you know, children that we've birthed or not. Women, you know, not even women, but the feminine energy is very connected to children, and we're very connected to this Mother Earth. You know, we love her and we want her to be healthy and we want her to be happy. And yeah, so it's a whole different shift. And that's, you know, the dominant energy in the third dimension is the wounded masculine. And the dominant energy, and I'm not saying there's one is better than the other, but the dominant energy in the fifth dimension is the feminine goddess. And I love that for masculine energy, so they can have time to just breathe as opposed to thinking that they need to be this certain way all the time. It's like, you don't have to be any way. You can just heal, you can regroup, you can lead and protect and do all those things, carry heavy things, do and love and be open and vulnerable and not have to feel like you can't cry or you can't. So anyway, yes, it's
That
very
makes a lot of sense.
Well, I was gonna add, actually, if you don't mind me taking over.
No, go ahead.
Here's what.
Yeah.
Here's your another point right here. Those people who have been blunt are probably one of the most successful human beings. You don't believe me? Let's look at some people who we know. And Son, you might appreciate this because you're British, so you actually might really appreciate who I mentioned here. Let's look at case in point, Gordon Ramsay and Simon Cowell. Here's my point. Okay, we know Gordon Ramsay. He's not afraid to tell you to piss off. Let's be honest. And Simon has no shame of hitting that red X if he doesn't like you. But you know what? That's their lack of empathy. But here's where the compassion comes in. When it comes to Gordon, guess what he wants to do for a living and is doing? Cook for people.
Right.
Right. That's me compassionate. He's doing it. He's showing compassion by cooking his heart out for hungry customers.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know a lot of people do it, but let's be honest, his food is way up there than a lot of other people. And then Simon Cowell, he's created a show and a franchise of shows that are giving people hope and people who probably thought they were worthless a chance on a, may I add, a humongous platform.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely doing that and everything. Just really quickly, Samuel, one of the things that I've always been fascinated by, and it comes up in certain stories, and it even has come up on this network a few times, is that I think that we sometimes forget that many of the great folks, and I think that's even partially what your podcast deals with, but many of the great folks of society were, as Sean just said, on the spectrum, whether it was Van Gogh or whether it was Beethoven or whether it was Mozart or a number of others. So do you feel that we are now starting to recognize that many of our great creative minds were on the spectrum in one way or the other?
Well, I think we're aware of it, but yet we're not accepting of it still.
Right.
I'm still getting special treatment because of the autism. I mean, I laugh at it because it's literally I appreciate with their heart's in the right place, but it's like I don't mind doing it. Case in point, I was at a wrestling convention a while back ago, and the wrestler didn't charge me to meet the wrestler because I was autistic. Mm-hmm. Now, as a wrestling fan, do I appreciate it? Yes, 100%. But in my brain, again, I want to pay. Why is that guy not meeting him for free? That's not right. That's not fair.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. We actually have a show here called The Angry Geeks. It airs, I think it's on Fridays and Saturdays. It fluctuates between those 2 days and everything. What got you into wrestling, and do you think of yourself as ever being a wrestler yourself, or is it just something that you like as a sport? And if so, what got you into that particular sport?
Nah, it's just something I've obsessed over ever since I was a little boy. My parents thought I would grow out of it when I was 6. No, that stuck with me for a long time. Wrestling itself, no, I've ate too many cheeseburgers to do that. But to answer your question about what gets me interested, it's really the art and the choreography of it. Mm-hmm. It's more than just, in my view, okay, you can watch a UFC fight and watch them punch and kick each other. All right, watching a fight, I want to see something more than just a punch to the face or a kick to the shins. You know, I want to see bodies get tossed around as well.
Yep, that makes sense. Before we get ready to wrap up, and we'll do that in about another 5 or 10 minutes, but I'll start with you, Sean. What is an unusual hobby or an interest that you have, like Samuel's interest in wrestling, that people that are watching this show might be fascinated that it is one of your hobbies or interests?
You sprung that one on me, Mark. I'm not sure. I like to brush my teeth in the shower, and sometimes I wash my cereal bowl in there as well. It's disgusting, but it's like it's become a habit. It's not really an interest, is it?
There's nothing wrong with that. I actually enjoy, and some people think that it's a weird thing to enjoy, but because I like the sound of it, the sound of a washing machine can actually be therapeutic, and I think that even Jen can relate to that as well. Because sometimes just the sound of a washing machine can be a therapeutic sound. So, what's something that's an unusual hobby of yours, Jen?
Let's see. Well, I think something that's unusual maybe is, a lot of people I don't think like to be outside of their comfort zone, but I prefer to be there as much as I possibly can. And so I'm constantly seeking different retreats or experiences, or just living in a way that I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone. I'm trying to push through, because that is my whole thing is I don't want any programs. I want to navigate my life freely, and I don't want any of the generational lineage, programs being passed down. And I just did breath work at a women's retreat this weekend, and I felt my dad and my uncle, who had just passed last week. My dad passed March 2024, and then my grandparents, their parents, all four of them were standing over me with their arms out, and they look very serious. And I think it's because I'm getting real close to breaking through. So the lineage stuff I want to break through, but I also want to break through the social human consciousness program. So that is a fun fact, probably, is I really do live my life in a way where I am continually doing things that probably other people would be like, oh my gosh, she is crazy. Like, why is she doing this? I like very intense things. Yeah.
I was gonna say, Jen, you're not the only one. I've spoken on several stages and conferences before, and I want to do them. It's like, I want to do it. I want to speak on stage.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're not the only one. So
yes. Well, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I hope I'm not the only one. I'm hopeful that there's a lot of people that are, especially right now, stepping outside of their comfort zone and freeing themselves. That's what I see it as, freeing themselves from the program and freeing themselves to allow them to be who they are.
Yeah, there's a gentleman that's actually Antonio. I'm trying to think of Antonio's last name, but he's been on a couple of the shows here on Pod TV and everything. But I think he's part of the spectrum. I won't say he even has autism, but he has written his own book, and he's actually a speaker. As a matter of fact, I think on March 15th on one of the Black business kind of coaching sessions, he'll be actually speaking, and he's spoken at some other things as well. So I know he's done his own book, and he's done a number of other things. So yeah, you can even speak. I know there was a gentleman that was a major stutterer, and he is still speaking despite the stutters and all along those lines. And I like what you said, Jen, about the ancestors, because even though my grandmother died way back in the early 80s, and granddad back in on mom's side back in 79, that grandma I was talking about was actually one of my mentors, and that would have been the early 80s. I still feel connected to them, just like I feel connected to some mentors that were in my life that have passed on, like Baba Chuck Davis, who was a dancer that was very much involved in African dance, and he passed probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But I still feel a connection to them, even though they are in the ancestral grounds and everything like that. So definitely, I think that is something that I think I can relate to, that wanting to be connected on the ancestral level. I'm not too sure about the taking the risk thing and everything, because I used to joke, and I had another ex that was into that whole skydiving thing. I will get in the plane. I will get in the plane to go to the destination, like the destination where I first learned of our other guest, Andre, and everything like that. But I'm not trying to fall out of a perfectly good plane to land on perfectly good earth and everything. But that's just me. I'm not willing to take that chance. Everything. Maybe at a later years when I hit 70, I'll be willing to take that risk. But right now, I'm perfectly either being on the plane or watching the plane land. I'm not trying to fall out of the plane.
Yes. And that's perfectly beautiful.
Yeah, that's just my opinion. Maybe Sean wants to fall out of a plane, but maybe he wants to go skydiving. But I'm not.
No planes for me. No.
I'll do it. Me. I'll do it. Me.
Samuel's the one who's yes. Perfect.
Someone's ready to try to go do it. Just really quickly, this has been a fascinating conversation. This is what the dinner party is. I invite different guests and everything. So I know, Jen, you already did yours, but I want to hear from Samuel. And I want to hear from Samuel, if you can tell folks a message of positivity, and if folks that want to get in touch with you, how they can get in touch with you. And if there's anything that you haven't touched on that you want to touch on. And if you want to drop that point for me and Jen, you can do that too as well. But if you don't want to do it, we'll understand that also. But if you want to, I'll start with you, Samuel, and then go to Sean. I'll start with you, Sean, and then go to Samuel. But we'll wrap up that way. way because I've got a couple of advertisements, PSAs that I got to run as well. But it's been a fascinating conversation, as oftentimes these dinner parties are, which is why I love doing them on Wednesday afternoons.
Well, if you want my piece of advice, I think it's kind of two, but it's the one's not really. I think it's not really me. I think it's just the truth. I just think if the world could be nice and not act so stupid, I think we get along so much better, don't you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot.
And then the second one is I always said, because of being on the spectrum, I've always felt isolated. And I thought for 15 years I would find no one. And I wish I could have told myself when I was younger that's a load of BS, because someone in this world is going to find you interesting. And that's really what I'm trying to say, is someone will find you interesting, because it's unrealistic that someone won't. There's I don't know how much people on Earth, a lot, I think 8.5 billion. Someone will have to look it up, or maybe 2 billion. I can't remember the stat. But anyway, there's 8.5 billion people on Earth, and you're telling me there's no one's going to find you interesting? Really? If you believe that, you would be widely mistaken.
Yep, makes sense. How can folks get Autism Rocks, the podcast, and how can they find your podcast?
Well, you can find me on your favorite media platform. Not a hard guy to find. Just Google search in your search engine optimization, Autism Rocks and Rolls, and something will pop up.
Cool. And do you have a book that you've got published, or you got any book plans?
Well, we have a book in the works of a publisher. There's a lot of irons in the fire. It's Journey, and it's about a park ranger who is on the autism spectrum. Her fixation was trees / nature. And we're talking about with her, she's having flashbacks from her childhood while giving little children a little tour guide around the park.
Sounds good and everything. Sean, anything you want to share? You want to drop that poem on us, and also anything that you want to just share in general in your message of wisdom, and then we'll get ready to get out of here. Like I said, thoroughly enjoyed all of you on, as I oftentimes do, and we'll have another one of these dinner parties next Wednesday, which will be on the 12th. I already got some guests lined up for that as well, but thoroughly enjoyed our conversation on this particular day.
I don't really have any poems to hand, except for the Prince lyric, maybe, let's go crazy, something. How about that? But in terms of wisdom, I'd say everything you've ever heard is just an opinion. It's not a fact. And that's always set me in very good stead. So I'll leave you with that one.
Sounds good and everything. Well, like I said, I've certainly enjoyed having the three of you on, as well as the other two that were on earlier. We'll go out with a award for teachers and everything like that. So it's a award that came out of, I believe it was Oklahoma, if I remember correctly, and all along those lines. So before I play this particular PSA of this particular organization that's been doing this now for several years and everything, and I know that teachers got a lot of love during the pandemic and everything. So as we go out the door, before I play this PSA, if everybody can give me their thoughts around teachers and the importance of teachers in society. So I'll start with you, Sean, and then close out with Samuel, but I'll definitely go to Jen as well. So before I play this PSA and we get ready to get out of here, if you'll share with me, because that's actually what we started off with, was parents as coaches and as teachers. So y'all's thoughts around the importance of teachers in society. So I'll start with you, Sean.
Teachers are extremely important. I used to be a teacher in Istanbul for 10 years in English, and I love that. It's important that kids always understand, and not just kids, but everybody learns to, let's say, go to the fifth dimension as soon as possible. I think that's a pretty good way to get them going.
Yes.
Makes sense. What about your thoughts about teachers, Jen?
Oh my gosh, I have 3 children, and teachers are they're I mean, the word I can't even, they're so important. They're educating the future leaders of our world, and it's not just educating from, the way that we've always learned, but teaching them hopefully, how powerful they are and about manifestation and connecting to one another in earth. And they're amazing teachers. Yeah. They are undervalued greatly, and they are so deeply important in our world.
Before I get to Samuel and everything, do you think that we are encouraging teachers to develop creativity enough, Jen, and everything? Because that's one of the things that I've been definitely advocating for, because I think sometimes we do that when they're young kids, but as they get older, we discourage creativity and we discourage the art of play.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think teachers, I have many friends who are teachers, and I think they're forced to work within a system that is broken. And there isn't a lot of room for that. And I think the powers that be, again, in the third, I think their true target is children. I think that is who they're targeting. They want kids to be dumb and uninspired and addicted to their screens. And there's a reason, you know, and who knows what programming is going into their devices when these kids are on them all the time. And as parents, it's impossible to monitor. So yes, I think teachers, I think they would like to be more creative, but they're forced to work within this system that is broken. We created that education system to create, you know, people to work at the factories where it's like, can I go to the bathroom? Can I do this? Can I do that? And asking questions. That isn't the world that we live in anymore. So the system itself is completely broken and needs to be revamped. And I think there are so many educators out there that are so smart and so creative that they can create a new way of doing it, you know. And I think when I tune into the fifth dimension with children and education and teachers, you know, educators, they're outside, you know, they're reading books, laying in hammocks, listening to light music. They're learning fractions by baking things. They're growing food. They're understanding how plants work and how animals, they're understanding everything firsthand because they're actually experiencing it, as opposed to being forced to sit in a classroom for 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day and going outside twice a day. The majority of time is outside. And again, going back to, you know, artists and creativity, music, dance, just even movement, you know, and art in and of itself, those are going to be very important in that new space, because those are important trainings for children. You know, it's important for children to explore that within themselves and to recognize, you know, what their gifts are and learn how powerful they are. So I think teachers would like to be more creative. I think, unfortunately, in the third dimension, at least, they're stuck within the system. But the good news is the shift is happening right now. And so that is one of the reasons I'm being inspired to go on so many podcasts and start my own right now, is to really get the message out that this is happening. So let's, you know, teachers out there, you know, organize with other teachers and let's do it better, because we can do it better. And it doesn't need to be the way that it's always been. It can be more encompassing and more loving and more whole and more enjoyable for everybody, for the students and for the teachers.
Yep, definitely. Sam, your talk on teachers and everything before I get ready to play this PSA, I will agree with something that Jen said, because I think that we're seeing more and more people that are liking to go outside and enjoy Mother Nature. I know that even though it was raining earlier and even though it was a brief walk, I did enjoy going out for that brief walk, and even saw some young birds that were up on the rail of the apartment above me, probably doing some light courting and all along those lines. But it was just fun watching them and watching Mother Nature and all along those lines. But your thoughts on teachers, and then I'll play this teacher's PSA, and we'll get ready to end this edition of the Online Dinner Party for March 5th, 2025.
Well, y'all talking about teachers being your friends. Try having a mother as one. My mother is a teacher. She's taught 8th grade for over 10 years, so she definitely knows her stuff when it comes to teaching. But yeah, she's not in it for the money. The reason she is in it is for the students. Mm-hmm. And like everyone, they're undervalued. They should be more appreciated. It should be like maybe in China, where when the teacher walks in, they get clapped. I know that for a fact. Like, I don't mean like they clap for them. I know that for a fact because my mom visited China, and that was a deal they made. One year, the Chinese students went to the American school systems, and then the other year, the American students went to the Chinese school system and learn about that. But I think that, you understand, if you're going to teach, you need to be in it for the children. And, you know, like my mother, I think it's fair that just like you even try to treat him like your own son, if you can.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. My dad was in one of those training programs as well, because he actually did it with, ironically, my next door neighbors are from that country. I think it was Eritrea. They're either from Eritrea or Ethiopia, but I know before he retired, he was in a program where some of the people were coming from, I believe it was UNC, the University of North Carolina, and then some of them were coming from a college in, I believe it was Eritrea, if memory is serving me correctly. So yeah, those teacher exchange programs are very important, no doubt about that. So we're going to play this PSA, and we're getting ready to get out of here. But it has been a fun conversation with all five of y'all, and hopefully I'll see y'all on a future episode of the Online Dinner Party as well. So hopefully we'll see you back in the near future, and thoroughly enjoyed having y'all this time as well. So y'all have a good one. I'm going to actually head dinner earlier, but I might have to have a second dinner and all along those lines. So I'm here to grab me food, but it was a fun conversation and learned a lot, as I always do. So we enjoyed having all 5 of you on, and hopefully I'll see all of you on in future episodes of the Online Dinner Party or just other shows here on Pod TV as well. So y'all have a good one, and I'll catch y'all later, whether you're over there in the UK or whether you're here in the United States as well. So y'all take it easy, and we'll catch you next time around.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great one. Bye.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you, I thank you, for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
Are you looking for money-saving strategies for your business and personal finances? Are you tired of working hard every day with little or nothing to show for it? Contact Prosperity Financial Services, LLC right now for your free financial consultation. Call now to reserve yours today, 804-349-8600, 804-349-8600.
It's time for Bible or Babble. Gather round for your new favorite show. If you little work, show 'em what you know. Let's go. Bible or Babble. It's Bible. Let's go. All in every saint, we gon' put you to the test. See who know that B.I.B. a little best. Bible or Babble. It's Bible. Let's go.
Hi, my name is Maria Jones, baker and owner of Very Vegan, a premier mobile bakery specializing in putting a plant-based spin on some of your favorite desserts. Inspired by my own personal experience with my journey with healthier eating habits, I was determined to make comparable items with desirable textures and great taste. We're always experimenting with different flavor profiles and expanding our menu. I enjoy my creative license as well as imparting ideas and requests from my customers. It makes for new and exciting items. Some of our customer faves are the specialty cheesecakes such as the banana pudding with homemade vegan vanilla wafers, strawberry crunch, honey bun, fruity pebbles, peach cobbler, and many others. We also offer moist, rich cupcakes, delectable cookies, decadent brownies, and scrumptious pound cake. Discover how amazingly delicious vegan can be. I am available for orders, or you can purchase my items exclusively at the Black Farmers Hub.